Brendan Cuddy, please unmute.
Brian, so what went into bringing back Aaron, and also why the delay? Why the 2 weeks?
Well, I mean, I think I would turn back to the summer. I would reiterate that, I thought Aaron Boone was part of the solution, wasn't a problem or the problem. And listen, I think Aaron brings a lot of great qualities. He's a great baseball mind, comes from an amazing family that has a history of, in this industry for quite some time, but his ability to connect, to communicate, to be open-minded. He's had a lot of success here, despite obviously our postseason, ultimate results, because our big goal happens to be a world championship, but that doesn't mean there's a lot of goals that, are getting accomplished or things to be proud of along the way. To be quite honest, if he was entering the free agent market, I believe he'd be the number one managerial candidate in baseball. And there's a number of different vacancies, and we would be going to market looking for someone like him. And so I think he's has been a good hire, and he's going to be a continued good hire in that position. I think, as I said, if you follow the breadcrumbs from the past, I think I've publicly stated how I feel about him. This is a manifestation of that. And it's not just me, this is an organization that obviously has a lot of input from a lot of people, and most importantly, the owner with the final say. And I think there's a great deal of respect for what Aaron Boone brings to the table and what he's certainly capable of. And so why the delay? We had to wait for the season to end ultimately, and then have a lot of dialogue above, and then ultimately, like anybody, they have an agent. We had, so I was negotiating with his agent in representation of Adam Katz, and then clearly we had some changes in the coaching staff too. So there was a lot of discussions to have, whether it's contract term adjustments along the way, and so I think. Everything all in due time. It's like anything else. It's not like it's as quick as just flipping a switch and you just get it done. There's a lot of details to work through, conversations to have, and boxes to check along the way. But at least from my perspective, there was never a doubt or an intent to have Aaron Boone back here. It just came down to working through it and making sure that I was going to get the sign of the cross from other powers that be at the same time. And when we actually got together after a little bit of time and delay, we had a conference call discussing all things, and all parties were 110% on board as well, in alignment on that.
We go next to Brian Hoke.
Cash, you've clearly made some changes on the coaching staff. What are you looking for with your next coaching staff? And can you go into those decisions to let Nevin, Pilateri, and Marcus Thames go?
Well, the optimal, it's a little bit of a slight difference in terms of it. You get some very difficult choices you have to make, and obviously being in the position that I sit in, you're forced to make tough calls, and involving people that you enjoy, have had a great working relationship with, and have had success with at the same time. But the decision, at hand was essentially, do I and we reinvest as we move forward in those particular categories, because the contracts were expired. Obviously, we've chosen to reinvest in Aaron Boone, and we've chosen to not do so, obviously. And I've made Marcus Thames and PJ, as well as Phil Nevin. I had those difficult conversations, letting them know that we are going to look to open those positions up as we move forward. And they're tough calls. I mean, they really are. And it doesn't mean like anything else, when you're in a leadership position, you have to make decisions that you hope are going to serve you well. And as you move forward and try to, find higher ground. And the challenge always is, sometimes those decisions are for the betterment. Sometimes they aren't, but that was obviously upon us right now. So listen, I think they possess a great deal of ability. They're good baseball people. But ultimately, we're going to be looking for some other options in those categories. And those conversations will take place now with Aaron Boone about how the staff will emerge and evolve as we move forward. But ultimately, I had to get Aaron done first before we can continue those conversations. And so I'm happy we've done that. But yeah, they were difficult calls to make. But hopefully, it'll serve us well as we move forward. But we'll see.
Eric Bolin, you have the next question.
Cash, you said that you guys as an organization saw Boone as part of the solution, not part of the problem. What organizationally do you see as the problem, if you see one at all?
Well, like every year, we're proud of some of the many successes we've had. Certainly, I don't want to deteriorate or take away from obviously the fact that we are a postseason contender, and at times, maybe not as much this year, even though we got in as the wild card and got knocked out abruptly. The fact that in many cases, there's times that people believe that's not the team that you want to play because they have a chance to, do the whole thing, which is our ultimate goal. But in terms of this particular program, the 2021 year, there was certainly a lot of frustration that, I'm going to take responsibility for because it's my operation. We went backwards in categories that certainly didn't see coming or expect. So obviously 2 of our areas of strengths were supposed to be our bullpen and our offense going into this season. And then obviously we went to trade deadline and try to reinforce and stuff. Our offense completely went backwards, went from typically a top 2 offensive and runs scored on a yearly basis to finishing 10th in our league this year, with a lot of different categories that were, flashing red lights of, alert, there's problems here, and try to solve those problems. But, as you go into being a leader of an operation, so I'm head of baseball operations, you always want your strengths to remain your strengths, and you want to attack your areas of weakness and to do the best you possibly can in that category. And while doing so, all of a sudden, to our surprise, as the season started playing out, our strengths were no longer our strengths. In some cases, injury related. I think we have an idea now why DJ LeMahieu, had the year he had. He was battling a core injury that he's now had. He's gotten surgically repaired. It's an 8-week recovery. Dr. Myers did that in Philadelphia, and so obviously he'll be ready to go by spring training. Obviously in the bullpen we had some issues, whether it's Zach Britton amongst others. So those were the areas that kind of were a surprise. But in terms of personnel, I'm in charge of personnel. I'm in charge of bringing the best talent I possibly can. And there was maybe at times, again, this was a tough team for some reason to figure out. This was a year that I would say might be my toughest. Every year you come through and have some, successes and failures, and you kind of, you do your debits and credits at the end of the year. But this particular year, I feel like, and maybe it's not the case, but I believe it is. It was my toughest year trying to understand. And I think I speak for us all in the operation, whether you're in the front office, on the field staff, and including the players, because I've had a lot of touch points with our players, personnel too, over the coming last month, including through yesterday, and we'll continue to try to figure out what ails us. But it was somewhat of a Jekyll Hyde. It was, at times looked unstoppable, but many other times unwatchable, because of the streakiness and the lack of consistency, and trying to unpack that, trying to solve that on the run. Clearly was able to get to a wild card berth in a 92-win season, but certainly that's not what we're about. So ultimately, back at it again, but that all falls on my responsibility to figure out, where I went wrong. And I certainly have certain categories that, I will say this in a blanket statement. We will be open-minded to everything and anything on this roster, as we should be. And I'll consider, I don't know what our budget's going to be financially yet. I haven't gotten that from our ownership, who's obviously been very dedicated and trying to put the best team on the field possible. But there's certain things that really were, head scratching and frustrating. And there were, again, as I said, that all of that falls on my responsibility. And so I'm going to be looking to upgrade, as I always do. You want to make sure your strengths remain your strengths and attack your areas of weakness. But there's certainly, after this 2021 season, there are some areas of weakness that have popped up in a lot of categories that did not exist prior to this year. And so, we got to really, determine whether those are systemic or if they are obviously aberrations. And then also here's the biggest key is go to the marketplace, whether it's the free agent marketplace with the available dollars we have before us, measured with the current commitments, or go to the trade market and see how we can solve that with what's available in the marketplace. And, hopefully, obviously there'll be some legitimate choices to reconfigure in certain categories. And if we can, I'll be in the better position to provide Aaron Boone with, maybe a more flexible roster that he can go to war with.
Go next to Pete Caldera.
Brian, how do you evaluate your shortstop position going into 2022? Do you feel like you'll have to go outside the organization to solve that position? And if you do, is that a stopgap situation waiting for your prospects to come up?
Yeah, bottom line is shortstop is an area of need, and it's going to be. We have to address it. I think obviously the way things played out this past year, you turn the clock back to 2020. It was a COVID shortened 60-game season. It's not necessarily easy to assess or wrongfully, assess where that position sat. Once we signed DJ LeMahieu, it obviously cemented a really, good player, in our belief, a good player at that position in Gleyber Torres going into the 2021 season, but it didn't play out the way we certainly had hoped, or the way I'd certainly hoped. So I would say that given that circumstance, without question, as I enter 22, I need to obviously upgrade that position from a defensive standpoint, and concede obviously that, obviously that concession clearly took place in season when we moved Gio over to short, or had, Velasquez come up, who even started the wild card game, and Gleyber moved over to second. So that kind of concession started to take place. We did talk at the trade deadline and try to match up with certain circumstances to also solve that and, get that push. We did a lot of things at the deadline. I failed at that endeavor there. So obviously I have another crack at it this winter and see where it takes us. But I think Gleyber is best served at second base, in reality. We'll see where that takes us, as I said. But yeah, it's definitely an area of need for us.
Lindsay Adler, you have the next question.
Brian, do you anticipate other changes coming to your coaching staff or your front office?
We'll see. Obviously those conversations, some of the heavy lifting, difficult ones have already happened, and they're not easy. But ultimately, I am charged, and we are charged with, again, continuing to reevaluate all aspects of the operation at all times. And so that includes coaching staff, that'll include front office, that'll include everything. So, obviously we unfortunately have more time to do that as our winter is upon us. And, but it never seems like there's enough time in the day for all those boxes to get checked yesterday. So, we're going to try to move through them as thoroughly as possible, but it's going to take some time.
And then you mentioned things like a flexible roster for Aaron. And in general, what do you think that, the organization needs to provide to help Aaron be the most successful version of himself as the New York Yankees manager moving forward?
Well, I think a manager's only as good as the players he's got, and I think Aaron's pretty damn good at his position. And I just obviously, and I think, and as I've talked to players on our club, obviously, we need to demand, excellence from them in all categories and find ways to extract that out of them. But I also need to find, as many great teammates to surround them with, whether it's, big names or small names or medium name type, people in the industry. So it's just, again, all of it's going to depend on, it's not my first rodeo. I'll go in the marketplace, evaluate what's really available and what's obtainable and what, and measure that against our available, dollars. We certainly have a lot of commitments here that we're married to, and then see, obviously, if there's matches in the trade market and or free agent market with the available dollars we have, all yet to be determined. But ultimately, clearly I acknowledge that we're not as athletic as we'd like to be, and certainly not, as contact oriented as we'd like to be. I tried to address some of that with, Anthony Rizzo, for instance, was an import in season. He's a high contact guy, one of the better ones in the game. Kind of matches when we did the DJ LeMahieu acquisition to try to offset some of the other stuff that we have in the lineup. Joey Gallo is very athletic. And so, and we got some balance in the lineup, but we'll continue to evaluate all the available choices in the marketplace to us. Rizzo's obviously a free agent now, or will be. And so we'll just continue to try to evaluate what's available, how those pieces may fit, and how we can configure in a way that, gives Aaron Boone on both sides of the ball, positionally and pitching wise, the best opportunity to have, the massive success our fan base deserve.
Dan Martin, please unmute.
Brian, do you see Gary Sanchez as the starting catcher going forward?
We'll see. We're going to evaluate all available options. Obviously, we have two catchers in Gary and Higgy. And in Gary's case, he's, I think he definitely came a long way defensively with a lot of hard work put in, tailed off towards the end on that aspect. He's one of the better offensive catchers in the game, but ultimately we'll have to evaluate, the marketplace at every position that we currently have a player clearly at. And if there's something that makes sense as we move forward, we have to take careful consideration at it, whether it's catcher, whether it's shortstop, whether it's center field, whether it's, making tough decisions trade wise, in other categories where we might have positions already filled. I just think we're going to have to be available and pliable on, and I like to think we always are on that. I know I had conversations with people in the past about like Gary and not moving on from Gary and it, at the catching position. And I know one thing, I know Gary has worked his tail off. Gary has been so committed. I am, I know at times the results might not, be there. But I am proud of the fact that you got a guy with a lot of heart, a lot of care, a lot of effort. And then sometimes, obviously, if something happens, it blows up on it magnifies it and takes people back, and understandably so, to maybe some years gone by. But, he worked his tail off all year to put himself in a position to be an improved player for us at that position this year. And for the bulk of the year that showed, and then at times of the year down the stretch, maybe deteriorated a little bit, but it's a tough position, and, you're measured against your peers. So obviously we'll be doing that, as we talk through it with Gary, with Higgy, and catching position is one of many we'll be certainly evaluating. I'm definitively telling you we're looking at shortstop, but we'll be looking at all positions at the same time.
Jack Curry, please unmute.
Brian, in Hal's statement about Aaron Boone returning, he said that the team needs to grow, evolve, and improve. How do you think Aaron can grow, evolve, and improve?
Well, I think like anything else, experience, new, every year, every game, I remember years gone by. I think Debbie Timon, who's in our marketing department, obviously has been running that for a long time. She had the slogan back in the 80s, at any moment, a great moment. So, so I would pass along with experience. You get at any moment, a new, experience, a new moment, a new stimuli where you're dealing with something you've never had to deal with before. And obviously here in the pressure cooker in New York, and being the manager of the Yankees now 4 straight years with various experiences, whether it's on, offense, pitching, defense, personal off the field, issues with players or contract walk years, all the above. I think all those things have served Aaron well. He's growing already, and already has grown, and will continue to grow. That's one of the reasons we're attracted to him, is because, it's not like it's a finished product, and that's what you don't want. You don't want to be in a position where this is what you get and that's all you're getting, and the ceiling is the floor, essentially. In his case, I think ultimately he's grown into being one of the better managers in the game. I was dealing with a few of the general managers that I respect in this industry as our season was going on, and they're like, "Hey, I read all this stuff about, Boone, there's no way that's the case, is it? And it was good to hear from afar how other people perceive him, because I know I'm on the front line and I see what I see play out, and it's got nothing but great respect for how he goes about his business and how he handles it. So ultimately, what we can do only as a front office is set a buffet table of array of choices and players at his disposal. And then he's charged with his coaching staff to determine lineups. He's charged with his coaching staff, how he's going to manage the starting pitching staff, when to pull them in a game, obviously when to utilize a reliever and factor in obviously the health protective side of things, and stay engaged with our medical staff about who might be available on any given day and who's not. And ultimately the default for him has been, as you've seen, is he's a protector of the players. He understands that, what it's like to play this game and try to post every day. And some things, are more available for public scrutiny than others. And, he's going to be very protective of his personnel and of the process, as he sees fit, because that's his default. So as I say all those things, I'm saying all his strengths, he's just a continuing growing, evolving, I think person in that position. And I think he's already very good at it, really good at it. And that's why we've reinvested in it, because we believe in him. But I don't have any specific category. You've got to be better here, or, I really don't. I think it's the managing position in Major League Baseball is very difficult. You got 162 games, obviously, of twists and turns in every category. And then you throw in a streaky situation like we dealt with this year, and then having to go, pre and post game with the media, stay engaged with your players, try to find ways to motivate them, keep them healthy. And at the end result, it's a very challenging role for anybody. And it's even more challenging if you're in a big market. And I think he's demonstrated that he knows how to do it. He knows how to navigate it, and he's not afraid of it either. And he's not afraid to take the slings and arrows and stand up. And, obviously the easy thing would be to say, I want out. I don't want any part of this. Instead, he's running to the problem to be a part of the solution. And I respect him a great deal for that.
Marley Rivera,
And
go
just
ahead.
a quick follow-up on one of the things you meant.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead, Jack. Go ahead.
Okay. You talked about the information flow from the front office to the manager. That has changed in the amount of time that you've been a general manager. I don't have to tell you that. How do you think that the organization and Aaron handled that information flow and then the execution of whatever information he received?
I think he handles it the same way as it's always been. I mean, our information for the most part has been pretty wired, and it's extremely similar to how it was, when his predecessor was here, which is the table gets set. We want to make sure that people are making informed decisions. The last thing we want to do is, I still remember, and I'm still fresh, things years gone by. So I'll touch on something way long ago, but it cost us potentially a World Series. Andy Pettitte was tipping pitches in Game 6 of Arizona. We had no idea, but the Diamondbacks did. We blasted, go to Game 7, have the lead in the ninth inning, lose it. So I always take back to a missed opportunity, obviously, of not being buttoned up in a way back then of whether anybody in our category and in any part of the operation, whether it's the manager, coaching, front office, scouting, what have you, no one knew that. And that's a deficiency that needs to be addressed, and so we've tried to address all those things. So information is important, whether it's coming from your pro scouting department, whether it's coming from the analyticals department, whether it's coming from your medical side, whether it's, the anti-tipping program, if you're, making sure your players aren't projecting what they're giving their signs out or tipping their pitches, what have you. And so those are all missed opportunities. So we just want to make sure that whenever our personnel are in a position like an Aaron Boone as a manager to make decisions, make strategic decisions, that he's done the work, went through the array of choices and then decided to commit to one direction and be all in. And that comes with information being provided for him. And then he sifts through it with his coaching staff. So, that's all, simple as that. So he's getting everything that his predecessors have gotten in the same way. And then, we cater it towards, whatever they need, they get catered towards. If it's a new coach that comes in, they might want it packaged differently, or a player might want through the coach, the specialty coach, it presented differently. And so every year that's the only tweaks, which is all right. Somebody might have a different idea of how they want the communication the information communicated, and some people don't want it, which is fine, but it's there. It's there if it's needed. It's there if it's wanted. And it's up to really him and his staff to sift through it and decide what to gravitate to and what's going to be impacting their ultimately the strategies they deploy, and then live with the results.
Marley Rivera, go ahead.
Hi, Brian. When your team lost the wild card game, there was a lot of anger in your fan base that was calling for the firing of both you and Aaron Boone. What do you say to your fan base today to maybe appease that anger?
I mean, listen, we finished we finished the regular season with Boston tied. Obviously, unfortunately, I wish it was at Yankee Stadium. It was in Fenway Park. We had our ace on our mound. You know, we had high hopes and expectations that we were going to get past that game, and Boston and their personnel obviously had their way with us in that game, and it's extreme frustration and devastation by it. That's at hand. That's the job. We're in the middle of obviously trying to get the outcomes what we want. It doesn't guarantee the outcomes we're going to get. I mean, that's why I feel like this team at times it was tough because of what it was a week earlier we go into Fenway and the team we played there. The team we played from their end, the team we were just a week earlier, and the team we were in that wild card game just seemed like it was two different teams. And that's part of that's baseball. Part of that is the frustration of trying to unpack what's going on at times with us, because at times we're unstoppable, and other times, we can't put runs on the board. Obviously, we ran into a situation a few times where we ran into some outs in that game, and but I don't know what to tell the fan base any more than the obvious, which is, we want more, we expect more, and that's what we're charged to provide more. And, that's certainly not what we wanted or expected. And, so now we have to live with that result that's put on us. We see Boston continuing to play as they move through the playoffs, and they're hot, and they're doing a lot of things that we expect and hope to be doing ourselves. But, but that's what happens when you get yourself in an arena. You got to find a way, and we didn't in that case. And the previous year we found a way to get past Cleveland in that series and move ourselves out to San Diego, and then got eliminated late in the game of a game 5 of the ALDS in that reconfigured playoff scenario. And prior to that it was the ALCS, so it just. There's a ladder you got to climb, and I acknowledge that we're not climbing that ladder, especially this past year, anywhere high as we expected to be climbing, and we just got to find ways to reconfigure and get past it. And that's all I can answer it with.
And Brian, just some housekeeping. You mentioned, Jason mentioned at the beginning of the call that you had some medical updates, plural. So I just wanted to run through some of the guys that you had injured. If you can give us first some more details on LeMahieu, and then just if you can give us updates maybe on Britton, on Boyd, on Clark Schmidt, on Urshela, or I don't know, on Hicks, whatever you have, please. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll run through. I sent myself an email so I didn't forget names. So since you've asked, I will answer. Jamison Tyon's going to have surgery on October 28th with Dr. Greisberg. Recovery time will be 5 months until he's back to pitching in games. So obviously, clearly, there's throwing programs and rehabs and stuff in between or towards the end of that. But the expectation is by 5 months he'd be fully operational and back to where he had been prior to the surgery. DJ LeMahieu had surgery last Tuesday to fix his core injury, the hernia. That was performed by Dr. Myers last Tuesday in Philadelphia. That's about an 8-week recovery. He's actually working out or rehabbing here currently at the stadium. Aaron Hicks is finishing off his recovery from his in-season wrist surgery, and I know he's looking or hoping he can play winter ball. But regardless of whether he does or doesn't, this should be resolved, by late November, if not December, either way. Luke Voigt is resting and expected to be ready full bore from his knee soreness. So ready to be full bore, but there's no intervention anticipated or expected surgically on that. Tim LeCastro is currently 3 months post-op he'll be running soon and hopefully be a player by the start of next season. So that's I'm not saying by the start of spring training, but the start of next season. Darren O'Day is currently rehabbing back in Atlanta and should be ready by the start of the season. Again, I'm not saying the start of spring training, but the start of the season. Obviously, he has a player option decision to make. Clint Frazier is in constant contact with our medical staff, on a weekly basis regarding the status of the dizziness and fogginess that he has experienced for far too long, as our medical team and other medical teams have been obviously working through that with him. And so they're staying in constant contact. He is back in Atlanta when, that he transferred from our Tampa complex towards late in the season to return home to Atlanta. I think I covered everybody on that category.
Okay, we can go next to Christy Ackert.
Hi, Brian. Aaron's contract is 3 years. I believe yours is up at the end of next year. Is there any update on that? And also, you said that you ultimately take responsibility for this, but how would you evaluate the job the front office did last year and this year?
My contract, I have a contract through next year, so I'm signed. So past that, I don't have anything to offer there. In terms of how how do I evaluate the job the front office has done? Obviously in certain categories, we imported some benefits. In other categories, we didn't. On a yearly basis, obviously every decision we make, we try to have a positive outcome. Whether it comes back to trade imports, free agent signs, and obviously draft, international, all the above. But obviously I certainly didn't do as well as I'd certainly hoped on the outcomes of a lot of the imports that we had, both last off season and in season at the trade deadline. Some obviously were very helpful and impactful, and others weren't. It's as simple as that. You can obviously follow the bouncing ball on who was beneficial and actually improved us in a really good way, and then ones you'd rather have back. In fairness to the players involved, I'd rather not name their names, but the decisions to import them, sign them, trade for them, those all ultimately fall on my responsibility. So,
does this lead to any changes in the process and how you guys will make decisions? Will you learn anything from this and take it forward? How will we see examples of that?
Ultimately, I think that we've had some really consistently good decisions. This past year, that didn't work out as much as I would have liked. I still think we have a very strong, sound process, but we're always charged with reevaluating things. I know ultimately I have a front office of administrators. I have a front office that consisted of pro scouts and former players, and I have a front office obviously that consists of people with an analytical background, and we blend it all together and ultimately make recommendations and decisions based on what's available in the marketplace and what will fit us financially in some cases. Or there's a lot of players we may pursue, but we don't match up because we're unwilling to pay the prospect category, for instance. It just depends. But there's everybody that's had a seat at the table still there that has served us well in the past. And but knowing every decision you make, they're not going to always come out the way you want them to either at the same time. But listen, Hal Steinbrenner is constantly challenging me to make sure that those evaluations of all processes need to continue, and they will. Ultimately, I'm not. There's no ego in the world that says that we are all knowing and everything we're doing is perfect. Obviously, that's why we're constantly turning things over. We lose people along the way, we add people along the way, and so we'll continue to always do that. And every time we add personnel, whoever it might be, it's because of the belief that they have a chance to positively impact us. We try to retain the people that we try to retain because we think they've been positively impacting us. There's a credibility tree, for instance, and a lot of people have earned the right to be very high on that tree because a lot of recommendations they make, have served us extremely well and allowed us to be a continuous postseason contender. It's really hard. I would acknowledge this and that it's really very difficult. At the same time, I know we have a lot of money and stuff, and which is a benefit to us. It allows us to keep ourselves treading water at a high level of a 90+ win team with making the postseason. It's very hard to maintain a successful team on a year in and year out basis. The easiest thing to do would be to turn it down, break it down, and live to fight 3 years from now or 4 years from now. And but that's not in our DNA. That's not in our category. And so we're going to continue to churn through it and try to maintain. And that means, at the same time, foregoing in certain cases certain things along the way that other teams have a chance to do to turn back the clock and live to fight another day. But that's not what New York is about, and that's not what Yankee fans deserve. They deserve a chance every year to take a shot at a World Series title by getting yourself in the postseason and seeing that, quote unquote, whatever can happen in postseason can happen. And you're seeing some of these things play out already, as you do every year. Teams get upset, and other teams move on, and their dreams continue. Our dreams obviously got short circuited early. Unfortunately, this year, the way our season played out, I guess it's less of a surprise that we got knocked out early than maybe some other years. Because I would acknowledge in other years that we got knocked out where we had a legit shot to take a run at the American League title and represent the league in the World Series and see where that would take us. This particular year, I thought we had a chance to do some damage and maybe, continue on, but it looked the way our team was going at times that it also could be a first round knockout. And that's what actually happened. But as tough as that is, we got to reconfigure, and I got to take responsibility for the ultimate outcome. So.
Thank you.
Sweeney Murdy, go ahead.
Hey, Brian, I want to kind of follow up on something that Christy was, I think, kind of getting at. There are times when your decision process is fairly transparent. When you had injury issues, you made changes to the training and the medical staff. The offense underperformed. You are changing hitting coaches. What's the evaluation process like for your analytics department? How do you determine their successes, their failures, their effectiveness? And do you believe you rely too heavily on that department in your overall decision-making process?
I think our analytics department's very good at what they do. Ultimately they're charged with, in their specialty category to present player evaluation. Obviously, we have algorithms on our defensive shifts and a whole bunch of different levels where analytics plays a role in not just our particular operation, but obviously all operations throughout the industry. And I think they've served us extremely well. They're very good at what they do in their category, and they'll continue to be, pushing their narratives. And then separately, we have our pro scouting where our scouts go out and about and do their advanced scouting and their pro assessments. We have our amateur world as well, where the analytics blend into all of that, from the development side to the amateur scouting side to the pro scouting side, as well as the managerial strategies that could at least an array of choices that will be levers for him to pull if he so chooses. They're really good. The people we have served us well and allowed us to maintain a successful, consistent playoff caliber team and a World Series potential contending team on a year in and year out basis. And so they have a hand in that, just as our other parts of the operation have a hand in that success. I know what you're getting at, because I do, and we've talked about the analytical world and how much it is or isn't impactful. I think ultimately, from the operation I'm running, it's a buffet table that gets set for our staff, and it's an information that they can pick from. It's not dictated to. It's not affecting us anywhere near in an adverse way that I think the public perception seems to be. And so, but we'll continue to evaluate all of our ways we communicate. But as I said, analytics, I believe, have served us extremely well to get us to this level, to maintain and put us in a position to have success, just like hiring the best pro scouts has, trying to hire the best amateur scouts has, trying to hire the best manager or coaches or player development personnel has. So they're all each, and medical team as well. They're all each individual categories that collectively are supposed to add up to obviously serving us well. So the Yankees should use every tool in the toolbox And then depending on the circumstance and the array of choices at hand at the moment in time, you rely maybe more on one versus another. And that depends on whether it's my decision in the end and my recommendations to our owner or our manager's deployment of strategies or how we develop players in the minor leagues. And, so it has an impact in a lot of different ways and mostly positive. So.
Ron Blum, please unmute.
Hi, Brian. How much does not knowing what the threshold is going to be, or even whether there's going to be tax, complicate your plans on making moves this offseason?
I can't answer that, to be quite honest. I don't, I've been, I'm more right now in the human resource side of things. I think typically the winners nowadays for baseball operations, general managers is obviously you're dealing with your manager, your coaching staff, your development staff, your scouts, and you're dealing with expiring contracts, and you're having those type of conversations. I have yet to have the conversation yet with what potentially is, other than acknowledging that we have large commitments already in play, and then depending on how the new collective bargaining agreement works out over the course of time, hopefully sooner than later, but that's above my pay grade. And so I don't have an answer for that.
Joel Sherman, please unmute.
Cash, two things if possible. You didn't really drill down on why the coaches lost their jobs. I believe at the same time you were defending Aaron Boone during the season, you were defending the hitting coaches also, that it wasn't their fault. So I wonder, are they being scapegoated here? Or are you also trying to address what you perceive as deficiencies in Aaron by maybe changing his staff?
I'm not trying to address any deficiencies in Aaron Boone. Obviously, I am trying to address or find higher ground in certain categories. And listen, when I commit, and something I'm very proud about, and maybe it's a fault at the same time, but if you follow the breadcrumbs of my conversations, when I put things out publicly, I mean them. We have an operation that we're all in. Some of the things that transpired were unexpected. And in the offensive category, there was a lot of unexpected. There's a lot of suboptimal performance from a lot of different positions, some more explainable maybe than others. But now we're in a position that's different. I didn't make any changes in season. People were on contracts. They had a full opportunity, and they were committed. They worked their tail off. They tried to find ways to solve the problems along with the front office and all personnel involved. We're all in it together. And I would say if I made a decision in season, that would be in the scapegoat category that you just pushed or suggested. But now it's the winner, and these contracts are expiring, and so that's why I use the word reinvest as we move forward. I'm making changes because I have chosen to not and with a lot of careful discussions involving a lot of people about not to reinvest moving forward in those particular categories and look for different options or opportunities. It's as simple as that, but it's definitely not a scapegoat. I'm not blaming Marcus Timms. I'm not blaming PJ Pelletieri, and I'm not blaming Phil Nevin. And in fact, I'd say, I don't know how many times I've said this is my responsibility. So if you want to blame anybody, you can blame me. If that's scapegoating me, then it's scapegoating me. That's what I'm doing, but I'm not blaming them, but I am charged with obviously no different than if you have to make a trade in season or whatever. Every move you make is not blaming the player that's going out the door. You're trying to be better or find higher ground. And so just choosing not to reinvest resources into that particular category with those particular people, and we're looking for alternative options, and hopefully we can find some solutions to it. But it's certainly not scapegoating, and I'm sorry if people take it that way. And I'm certainly not blaming those individuals, but again, I'm charged with reinvesting now and deciding to move forward with them as part of the operation or not, and that will happen consistently on a year in and year out basis, regardless.
Cash, the other subject was, you said you were caught off guard by some of the stuff that happened this year. I suppose specifically on the offensive end, but you detailed three specific areas, which was Glaber at shortstop and maybe lack of athleticism and lack of contact is what you detailed. Those were not things that kind of snuck up on you. There certainly have been questions if Glaber was a shortstop, if you had enough athleticism and you had enough contact in your lineup. Why did you not pivot away from that? And do you think that's reflective at all at something that needs to change in your front office about sticking with certain things along the way?
Well, you and I've had this conversation before, so I'll reiterate the same one we talked earlier about, and we can agree or disagree or what have you. So it just comes down to the array of choices that are available to you at the time. So, for instance, Gleyber Torres, once we signed LeMahieu, and I use LeMahieu as an example. So, as you just discussed about the contact, and it's not sneaking up on us. Well, we imported LeMahieu because of his contact ability, a number of years ago. And that became with great consternation from curiosity of why are we doing that? Anthony Rizzo, this trade deadline, one of the better contact hitters, obviously, in the sport, and a left-hander, which balance was a big question, even though for historically, most recently history with our team, we were scoring, our run scoring production was against righties and lefties with a pretty predominantly right-handed hitting lineup, without the balance. But again, some of these narratives pop up. You try to look and navigate and address, if possible, with the array of choices behind you. You don't want to make yourself worse while doing so. So when we signed LeMahieu, it cemented Gleyber at short. Acknowledge that. And then in the event that choices come your way, what are those choices? And then what does that do to this, 23, 24-year-old player that, has a massive high ceiling, has got a great deal of ability, but just also coming off of a frustrating 60-game 2020 season in COVID. And so if that was a mistake, for making the 20 season in the abbreviated year, more of an aberration, and Gleyber got going in September and into October and looked like the player he had typically been before he did in July and August, of the only 2 months of that year. I've certainly reinforced that aspect of Gleyber and his, early major league career. But in the meantime, tried to address obviously athleticism. Joey Gallo is very athletic, and Anthony Rizzo is one of the better defenders as well. As so athleticism kind of, represents or manifests itself. It shows up in defense and it shows up in base running. And then contact, obviously contact. So Rizzo's import was just another continuation of trying to offset areas with the array of choices that you have. And so people talk about our strikeouts and we strike out too much and we need more contact, which is true. I mean, I don't disagree with that. And at the same time, we didn't strike out as much as the American League's best record, the Tampa Bay Rays, who struck out more than we did. We try to address balance because, obviously if we could find some left-handed bats that could balance us out and navigate what started to become more of an issue this year than it had in prior, where teams could obviously neutralize us and reduce our offense the way it got reduced. Obviously we got some balance in there. So, obviously those are examples of trying to address those on the run, obviously in season, but guilty as charged that I obviously did not address shortstop or walk from Gleyber last winter. If that's the question you're asking, then I'm guilty as charged by that, because ultimately you've seen a lot of success from him. I have a lot of people in our operation that make recommendations. It was difficult conversations, but obviously we could have turned the clock back and chose not to sign LeMahieu, I suspect. But that was, someone that we really believe in and thinks is part of our solution here, not necessarily a problem, one of the drivers for this operation. So I feel like we're lucky to have DJ LeMahieu. And I feel unfortunate that LeMahieu was not able to be LeMahieu this year because of an injury. There was a curiosity of what was going on. Now we really, I think, have a legit answer why. And so I look forward to getting him back and healthy next year and having, the impact that he typically has, well above average, and being maybe a perennial MVP again that he had been the prior 2 years. We certainly missed that, but it's not his fault. Injuries are part of the game. But that's why in my conversations with our players, and as well as you today, as well as our staff members, my takeaway and walk away after I try to figure out what people think ails us and try to get the honest truth from them. Because sometimes it's hard for people to convey things, I guess, necessarily to me as much as to some subordinates maybe, or what have you. Just like, hey, sit down, let's break bread, let's find out what's going on. Player to me, or coach to me, or staff member to me, is that You just want to resolve it so we can figure it out. And then my walk away in the end is, and it's my job to find better players to arm you with, better teammates to arm you with, because ultimately that's the job at hand, is to try to find a collection of talent. So if somebody fails, you're looking for somebody else as a collection of talent that can offset that. So that's why, it takes a village, and that's why we try to assemble as much quality, high-end, talented players as possible. So, because like anything else, you're never firing on all cylinders, and you can never count on health for all categories. And that's the major league season as it plays out, and it plays into October. You see teams that are really talented that can't deploy fully operational the way they like, because guys, whether they're getting COVID, whether they're getting hurt in postseason, and they get taken offline, and it recalibrates their ultimate strength. And now a new norm exists, and dealing with those new norms is obviously the magic. And obviously in my case, I've certainly failed this year in that magic, and in years gone by, in terms of getting us all the way to the World Series and ultimately winning it. And I don't know if you have a follow-up on that, please follow up, because I'm trying to answer your question.
So my only follow-up, Cash, would be to ask the question of, you always talk about having the full array of what's available, which obviously we don't. You're talking to 29 other teams, you're talking to agents. Was there ever a question about, like, we need to step back at X and be maybe worse on paper because it makes the overall product better? In other words, like this group of talent to this group of talent is not equal, but we have to put together a whole roster. And did you guys have any blind eye for seeing that? Because the stuff you talk about is you use the term on the run. You fixed it on the run. The question is, did some of this stuff was obvious before you were on the run? And should it have been addressed by maybe even stepping back and quote unquote having a worse player on paper?
It's hard to gravitate to worse players on paper. So if you have pro scouts, you have analytics, and they're saying this is a worse player on paper, but it's going to make you better, I don't like those conversations. So I guess that would be a new experience in my years in the front office, whether it's coming up from, in the player development system as an administrator, or the major league side as an assistant GM for 6 years, and then as obviously in this category as general manager with the people that have served me well and therefore us well. But I've never been in a meeting where we need to get a worse player because it's going to make us better. And I'm sure that's not how you're framing it, but
it's not, Cash. What I'm trying to say is, like, you talk about, like, hey, we are only able to do something within what Hal Steinbrenner allows us to do, etc. So everything is a balancing act of what's available, what you can do. And sometimes you have to take like some salt someplace to improve overall. Like, you have someone like Luke Voigt. On one hand, he accentuates what you do well. On the other hand, he accentuates what you do poorly. Are you better off changing it because you have to look at the rest of the team and say, he mimics so much of what we do poorly that what he does well is not worth having, and maybe we should have something else there instead for the better of the whole?
And I give you Anthony Rizzo based on that exact comment. So we brought Rizzo in knowing that Luke Voigt is a very good player in this game. He obviously is a thumper. He's on base. He's right-handed, where Rizzo would provide defense, more contact, still give you power, and on base. They're just a little different players, obviously. Some of Voigt's strengths aren't as much as strengths for Rizzo, and some of Rizzo's strengths aren't the same as Voigt's. But in terms of our overall configuration, made a very difficult decision that put me in a tough position to talk to a player in Luke Voigt that I respect. He has helped us in a lot of different categories and drive us to very successful places for the period of time. And I was forced to be in a position of, do I not do a deal that's going to make our overall team better as we move forward the next 2 months? Because I have this particular player that's helped us, and he's been hurt, but he's gonna, at that time he was supposed to be back and fully, operational the rest of the way. It didn't play out that way. But so when we made those decisions and they had those difficult, ultimate outcomes to make, made the tough choice, and it was the right choice, ultimately for our team, which brought in, I think, checking the boxes of the categories you're curious if we're trying to deal with or address. And, I guess you would turn the clock back. Should we have walked from Voigt and had a Rizzo like maybe at first, if that's the category in the wintertime, if that's what you're talking about? I mean, yeah, I'm guilty as charged. If that's the case. Obviously, we have a lot of discussions with a lot of clubs along the way, and I'm not afraid to make those choices. Maybe the Rizzo Voit one in season was one of them. It doesn't mean that we didn't have choices like that, that we tried to make in the wintertime. But in my opinion, and I can't really go through examples for you because it would involve players with other clubs and, per se tampering. But we go to market even though I'm stating publicly, because we have a first round knockout in the wild card, we're past that every year, and we're falling short of a World Series, but we're farther in the postseason. Trust me, even though you may not want to, we have those difficult conversations in the winter. We have them in spring training where we have players that we really value and have served us well, but we are having conversations that if we could get that, it could reconfigure us, make us better, maybe more athletic, whatever, give us more payroll relief, whatever, give us more contact, whatever. Those efforts take place. Just because we don't at times get a resolution like we did in season with Rizzo doesn't mean those efforts aren't there. You just can't see it, or you can't measure it unless it leaks out. And then I can't necessarily acknowledge it too easily at times either. But listen, I got to be better at what I do. I also think, despite the onslaught, we're pretty good at what we do at the same time. And it's the balancing act of, are we good enough? The answer is no. Do we need to be better at what we do? The answer is yes. Do our fans deserve the best of the best? Always. I'm proud of what I've accomplished, and I regret of what my failures are. And all I can do is, just like I try to attack the areas of weakness on our roster and hope the strengths remain the strengths. I promise you that we do the same thing in the front office, and we have very difficult conversations. And they also go with ourselves. I mean, it's not easy, acknowledging publicly what I've tried to acknowledge so far throughout this presser is ultimately it falls on me, and then obviously, if Hal Steinbrenner or anybody wants to decide ultimately to make some changes down the line, that's above me, and that's above that category. And, but we're above my category, but, all I can tell you is I'm committed constantly to have the best personnel to serve me, hire people smarter than I am, to serve me, and everything that's serving me is serving us. And then those recommendations get made to Hal. And trust me, when I make recommendations, for those who don't know, if I have, because I know there's this underlying belief of analytics and too much analytics. And I think we've exhausted, maybe not on this call, but many calls or conversations with many people throughout. That's well overstated. But every opportunity that presents itself, I'll get sometimes alignment with analytics and pro scouting and development. Sometimes it's not in alignment. And ultimately, when we choose to go one direction or another, it's with the full array of choices and shared information, whether it's with our manager, with our owner, with our team president, about this is what this person says, this is what this category or this department says, this is what their representations are. And no different than Aaron Boone having decided to pull a starter too late or too early, or pick this reliever versus that reliever, or pinch hit or not pinch hit, or deploy this particular lineup versus that one. It's the same goes on in the front office, where we're constantly obviously having to make those difficult choices and peel the onion. And then when the dust settles, you have to live with the results. The results have been pretty good for a long time, but not good enough, obviously, with the ultimate outcome for a World Series. So I'm not sure, anybody, I'm open to have more conversations about it, and with anybody. And trust me, I'm having conversations with the people, the powers that be, always. And that's not different today than it was before our first round knockout this year. Because ultimately, that's on the ownership side, that they have those demands, as well. And I try to honestly answer everything always and make sure that they have the full information so they can make the best decisions for their family and this fan base from much higher level than I am.
We're going to take one or two more. We're at about an hour. Aaron Boone's been waiting patiently. Dave Lennon, please unmute.
Hey, Cash. Money has always been a strength for the Yankees, and you guys have spent a lot of it when you've targeted players you wanted. Recently, Garrett Cole, obviously, with a record contract. Then also, you guys make trades that you laud for being payroll neutral, which keep you under the payroll tax. So I think there's some confusion. Is Hal all in spending wise to win a World Series, or does that luxury tax remain very much a priority as well? I think that's kind of the mixed message. You know, should you guys, or should you convince Hal, or should that be a part of you guys to fill these deficiencies more aggressively financially, even if it means having the payroll go higher?
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I don't want to speak for Hal Steinbrenner, but I don't know how to run a business. It's not my, I obviously, I guess in some cases people want to say I don't know how to run baseball operations, but that's what I do. That's my supposed area of specialty, right? So I'm not here to. I'll give you my opinion. It doesn't mean it's correct, but Hal Steinbrenner has a fiduciary obligation to run this business, and it's obviously also has the component from a family standpoint in the Steinbrenner legacy, and obviously winning and delivering. And that's a balancing act. There's a lot of pressure points that come with that. And certainly revenue sharing and luxury tax. And then you throw in the COVID pandemic and everything else like that as you manage through this thing. This man and his family are dedicated to delivering a successful team on a year in and year out basis that can have at least the belief that it has a chance to compete and win a World Series. And at the same time, have the obligation to their investors and run the business in a sound way that does not put, I'm sure, any of that in jeopardy. And so I can just tell you that, yes, luxury tax and revenue sharing and all those things, I'm sure in most worlds are real. They were put in place for a reason, years gone by. And I'll let the commissioner and the players union head speak to the reasons why, and as they continue to negotiate the new world order as they move forward. But they were put in play for a reason, to create balance between the big markets and the small markets. And yes, at times we've gone over to go all in, and at times we've had to reconfigure and pull back. Why at those times and the pressure points, they're all real. I can tell you that, but I can't speak to that at the same time. I can just tell you that I have no complaints on being told these are the lanes you can drive in. I don't ask for why. I think there's a lot of different ways to climb the mountain, and he and his family have been all in since birth, and that obviously goes all the way back to their dad. But the dad was playing, the boss who belongs in the Hall of Fame, and he obviously operated under different rules and a different game. And a lot of the CBAs that have come out of play in maybe it's the last 6 for all I know, I can't remember, but it's been a long time. But they're all targeting to prevent the Yankees from being the Yankees amongst teams like the Yankees too. The few teams that are considered super teams, I guess, so to speak, super operations, super, benefits that come with being in the markets we're in, and to shore up the other markets and give them a different, platform so they can, compete and thrive and survive and what have you. So I can't navigate that, but I don't believe it's fair from my chair that people don't think he's all in or they're all in. I think the commitments. So obviously we've had a lot of great players. That's the one thing about the Yankees, having great players and ultimately every now and then a great team. And I mean, a great team being a world champion. And so we've had a lot of great players that allowed us to import and try to finish things off. And I hate to say it, but how dare anybody question when somebody commits the amount of dollars to import, for instance, Garrett Cole, or prior to that, the Stantons of the world, who so far, when given a chance to be in postseason, got like 1,100 OPS. It seems like, he's just been, a beast, and just trying to get, again, but it's my job to surround them with more talented people. But he's all in with that stuff. But there's only so much he can do at the same time. And, that's the tightrope he has to walk. And ultimately, he's not in this to be a wild card first round knockout to our rivals. I can answer that obviously, honestly, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. And he's not in this, with the money he's investing to be disappointed. And that's why he's charged with making very difficult decisions, which he's not afraid to do. And he's not afraid to take the time. Earlier in this presser, I was asked specifically why it took so long to Boone, obviously because I think like anything, he wants to make an informed decision. He wants to take a step back, absorb everything around, not make an emotional decision, and then process everything around him and talk to a lot of people. And it's not just me. I'm sure he relies on a lot of different people to get his avenue, but but I would defend him and his family to the fullest. They are all in, and these pressure points are real, and they, in most cases, I would say I'd say that we are operating well above and beyond the norms always, and on a consistent basis. And and maybe somebody can throw the Dodgers' most recent run with their ownership out as an example of, well, they do it differently. Well, that might be a unicorn. I don't know. I mean, but he's gone above and beyond some years, and other years he's had to pull back, and there are all reasons for that. And it's it's based on his individual information that as he's trying to run a business and honor his obligations and make sound judgments and react. And on top of that, as I restated, he carried our employees for a long time when a lot of places were letting people go, and he's had to make very difficult decisions. And he's a good, caring person that has obviously everybody's best interest in heart, and that's a heavy burden to carry. But I don't think I have any more to add than the fact that I would disagree with anybody saying he's not all in, but I can tell that at times there's frustration that fans want because they don't have to live in that world. That they just want a winner, and that's what we all acknowledge. They're here supporting this team and pushing those pinstripes for better or for worse, and they don't want the worst, they want the better, and they want the best. And but trying to deliver, that's obviously the trick, right? And obviously that's the goal, and that's the effort, and that's what I got to get better at, obviously. So
Thanks, guys.
Okay, everybody. I know there's a lot of hands up, but it seems like he'd answer one and 3 more would be raised. So we're well past, I think, an hour now. We have Aaron Boone waiting patiently. Cash, thank you for the time.